Hey, everybody, welcome to the Grow Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Kevin McNulty, and this is your personal development school of growth, where each week my guests and I will bring and break down big ideas and practices that will help you learn, grow, and succeed in life. Thanks for checking us out. Now let the growth begin. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Grow Yourself, your personal development school of growth. And my goodness, do we have something very special today for a lot of different reasons. And so today we're gonna talk about this idea, and you all have heard this expression, this idea of being all in. And of course, we mean, not half committed, not dipping your toe in the water, kind of the commitment that changes how you think, how you work, how you show up every single day. And, if I'm honest, this is something I've wrestled with. I think many of us do, maybe except for members of a SEAL team, but I have certainly struggled with this in my own moments, where I knew I had more in me, that I wasn't sort of fully aligned or engaged, with the things that mattered most to me. Well, my guest today, he wrote a book about it, literally. And actually, he wrote a playbook on it. And it's very important that you understand this. So, Brent Gleeson is a Navy SEAL combat veteran who has taken the discipline, the clarity, the intensity of that world and brought it into personal and professional growth and high performance. His new book, All In, is about choosing one meaningful goal and building the routine and structure to pursue it with full commitment. By the way, this is not a motivational talk. This is about living with intention. It's about designing your days in a way that reflects what you say you actually want. So today we're going to explore what being all in really looks like, and how you know you are not being all in, and what it takes to build a life that matches the potential you carry. So let me just say a few more words about my guest. Brent Gleeson is a Navy SEAL combat veteran whose life's work has revolved around courage, discipline, and service. After serving with SEAL Team 5 on multiple combat deployments, he took the lessons of the teams, that is teamwork, grit, relentless excellence, and built extraordinary career in the civilian world. He's the author and the CEO, excuse me, he's the founder and CEO of Accelerate Leadership, where he helps organizations build cultures of trust, accountability, and high performance. His work has influenced leaders across the industry and earned him a reputation of being one of the most impactful voices in the modern leadership development. Before launching Accelerate, Brent co-founded Internet Marketing Incorporated, one of the fastest growing digital agencies in the nation, and was later recognized by Entrepreneur Magazine as a top 10 CEO. I mean, that's pretty serious right there. He's a respected columnist for Forbes and Inc., a sought-after global speaker, and the best-selling author of Taking Point and Embrace the Suck. His insights blend from intensity of special ops with a deep understanding of human potential. And now he brings all of that into the new book, All In, a powerful guide to choosing what matters most, structuring your life around disciplined, meaningful action. This is a very serious professional and a brother in arms. And all I can say is welcome, Brent, to Grow Yourself.
Thank you, brother. Been looking forward to this and appreciate you having me on the show.
I said this before, and I'm just going to say it again. And I say this during Veterans Day as well, that, my dad was a Green Beret. I spent some time in DIA and worked, worked somewhat, not side by side, but worked enough with special ops folks to realize that it, and I hear what you say. You're the humble warrior who includes everybody in the fight, and I get that. But I have such profound respect for special operators and rangers, all of them, those people that are fighting the enemy face to face. I mean, in the real fight. And so I don't diminish anybody else's service, but thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. It was a blessing to have had the honor to serve. And, as a lot of us know, in the special operations community, we get a lot of cross-pollination. I mean, in my first SEAL platoon of 16, our OIC was a former Army guy. We had a couple of former Marines. So really, really deep sense of diversity when it comes to experience and
Yeah.
tactics, strategy, personalities. So I think that's what obviously creates a winning recipe for, elite execution on the battlefield.
100%, 100%. Well, listen, Brent, would you, before we kind of get started and talking about your works and your book, tell the folks a little bit about you. I mean, tell us, where were you brought up? Just anything that kind of led you to this place where you're
Sure.
at now.
I think the most important part of my background is that I grew up in the great nation of Texas. So that sets the tone for excellence right there. No, I grew up in Dallas, did my undergraduate education at SMU, Southern Methodist
Mm.
University. Grew up in a loving household, two parents and a twin brother. We are fraternal twins, so polar opposites in every possible category
Wow.
you can imagine. We can come back to that later, but not like the fraternal twins I know. We are
Gotcha.
completely different in every aspect. Love them,
Yeah.
but completely different.
Gotcha.
And then upon graduation, I took a job as a financial analyst with a global firm. But during my time at SMU, I had become close friends with actually one of my fraternity brothers who was a year behind me. He was one of these young men who had a lifelong dream and passion to join the Navy after college and at least attempt to be accepted into the notorious Navy SEAL training pipeline. Now, this was right before 9/11, so obviously the implications of service at that level brought a little bit of a different meaning. And so initially, of course, I thought that was a ridiculously unrealistic career path for a young person to pursue. So I was business school brainwashed, and I was like, yeah, that's good. Good luck with that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
not for me. But during my senior year, we started training a little bit together on the weekends. And then when I graduated, in the very limited spare time that I had, I was working 70, 80 hours a week, but late at night on the evenings and definitely on Saturdays and Sundays, he and I would train together. So for me, just a way to stay fit, have an accountability partner. I'd been a college athlete, so just wanted to find some semblance of a fitness regimen while I was
Yeah.
grinding away at my first job after college. And he was a senior, but by nature of that training regimen, we started spending a hell of a lot of time together and having more deep level discussions on the implications of what this journey would entail. So that sparked my interest, and I started reading whatever the available literature, if you will, was at the time, some of the books and the history of naval special warfare from Vietnam through Korea and Desert Storm,
Mm.
even all the way back to our forefathers from the underwater demolition teams in World War II. And I became fascinated by how we build high performing cultures and how that leads to high
Yeah.
performing results on the battlefield and how we build teams that are arguably the best in the world at what they do. And
100%.
so that growing fascination, coupled with the extremely tedious and grueling nature of my entry-level financial analyst position, led to the culmination of a decision that shocked my parents. But I decided to leave my job and not even go in as an officer, but he and I enlisted in the Navy. We had officer packages ready to go, but then
Wow.
we looked at the mathematics of it all, and we run 6 classes a year, and only so many slots per class go
Mm.
to
Gotcha.
officers. Naval Academy gets half of those, and our OTC and OCS programs get the other half. So it's very competitive to get into a class as quickly as you like. That's why 75% of our enlisted SEALs have undergraduate degrees. They choose to enlist instead of going officer or become
I
officers
didn't
later on.
know that.
Yeah. So we did what a lot do. We dumped those officer packages in the trash, went down to the Navy recruiting office in downtown Dallas and told them of our extraordinary plan, which of course they roll their eyes and they, sure, sure. Yeah, sign here. Good luck
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, 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 yeah.
That's
And
crazy.
so that was that. And then we were shipped off to boot camp, and that's where I realized that I potentially made the most extraordinary mistake of my entire life. Just kidding, but it was a little bit of a shock,
It's a
if you will,
shocker. Yeah,
going from
I'm sure.
college to corporate America to
Yeah.
Navy boot camp with a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds, all of whom apparently were going to butts.
Interesting. Yeah.
Everybody there was apparently becoming a Navy
Yeah.
SEAL. Didn't feel
But
very.
now you don't immediately go into the SEAL environment, do you? You do you have to spend a few years in the Navy and regular Navy first, or did you
No,
move on?
no, you can enter at that time. They called it a SEAL Challenge contract. Use the term contract, as you know, being a military man,
Hmm.
very loosely. There's no contractual obligation of any kind that
Hmm.
you're going to go to BUDS.
Yeah.
You still have to pass the appropriate tests and exams and all that to get into the program. And then after boot camp, you back then we'd have to go to an A school to select our rate or the job that we would be taking once we failed out of training.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and then you'll go to BUDS. So, of
Yeah.
course, in boot camp, you still have to pass the physical part of the test again.
Right.
So a lot go in and fail it then, and that's the end of the journey. They're
Wow.
immediately in the fleet. So, anyways, long story short, did my time in the SEAL teams. 9/11 occurred while we were in the middle of our initial training. Very busy,
Wow.
several combat deployments, very kinetic, very busy. Later, when I transitioned out, went to grad school, and then I've been a tech entrepreneur ever since. So,
Wow.
married, 4 children, 3 dogs, a cat that I didn't necessarily initially want, but he's
Okay.
actually pretty
I,
cool.
I feel your pain there.
Yeah, so my schedule is absolutely bananas.
Wow. Four kids, dogs, and a cat,
And those
man.
kids
Wow.
range from 19 down to 4. I've got to run a root cause analysis to figure out why the hell this keeps happening, but eventually
Yeah.
I'm going to be coaching flag football for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, listen, tell me before again we jump into all in. You know, a lot of what the SEAL team does and SEALs and special operators do is intriguing, but would you mind just sharing, what's it like? And I'm interested in maybe even some of the principles that you're involved with or that you operate by within a SEAL team. But first, you know, is there any way that you can describe to our audience what it's like to be on a SEAL team on a mission? What is that like? What's the numbers of people that you're with? And just give the folks a sense of what that's like.
The first word that comes to my mind, at least, especially initially, is surreal. I mean, when by the nature of the timing of my entry point into the Navy, then into the SEAL teams, Afghanistan had kicked off while we were in SQT or SEAL qualification training, advanced training, before we went to our team. So by that time, there were rumors circulating that war in Iraq was potentially imminent. As it turns out, my task unit of 40 SEALs from SEAL Team 5, we were actually the very first task unit in operating in Iraq. We
Oh,
deployed in April of 2003. SEAL Team 3 had come up from the Afar Peninsula, pushed north with the Marine Corps. Then we took over to operate in and around Baghdad, Ramadi, Fallujah, some other areas needing our attention, if you will, to predominantly run capture or kill missions, hunting down the terrorists on the deck of cards, blacklist, other various insurgent faction leaders as the war raged on. But yeah, it's definitely not like the movies, but it is absolutely surreal to think that you had gone through all that training and now you're actually living it out on the battlefield. Now, granted, it also became more surreal because sure, by the nature of our training and by our brand reputation, if you will, for lack of a better way of putting it, we might
yeah.
be looked at as the best in the world at what we do. But at that point, none of us had ever been to war before. Even the
Holy
guys who've been
cow.
in the team for a long time, none of us had ever seen combat. None of us had applied any of these real world skills, skills in a real world setting. So we were literally, to certain degrees, rewriting the book on urban warfare, close quarters combat, capture or kill, even
Yeah.
CQB tactics were evolving almost on a weekly and monthly basis based on the evolution of the enemy learning our tactics and us having to adapt to those, but also having been trained kind of in the old ways. Again, we're talking about small incremental improvements, but still, it was a became a constant state of organizational transformation in that post 9/11 world across all special operations communities.
So what's the word of the day in that kind of scenario? Because I think I know what you're saying, and that is that, Baghdad and the rest of these places were, Vietnam wasn't like that for certain. That was more jungle stuff and whatever. So you're going, door to door type stuff, and I mean, you're just like down in the mix. I mean, what was the word of the day about how you deal with a circumstance where that's a new scenario and you're new operators?
It purely comes down to the way any high-performing team works. It's about good planning, flawless execution, and continuous improvement. So continually analyzing, just like you learn in the Air Force or any branch of the military. We're big on debriefing and after action reviews, which is the bedrock of our continuous improvement modeling. Looking at what do we do well, where do we fall short, what are we going to apply as far as lessons learned to doing it better every single time we step onto the battlefield. And going back to what I said before, we're usually talking about not massive transformations of tactics or
Right.
strategies, but small incremental improvements so that every single time that's something that comes out of one of those debriefs or peer-to-peer learning moments or casual conversations, that those things are documented, applied, and also shared broadly across the teams in the organization. So everybody can elevate their performance in real time as opposed to waiting for, documented intel reports to
Wow.
come out or pass downs from team to team, but real-time learning, real-time application, so that we don't keep making the same mistakes over and over again. But ultimately, yeah, it comes down to just getting the job done.
What
So
what is the maybe the thing that surprised you the most about being on a SEAL team and out on a mission? What is there any one thing that just jumps out at you that really surprised you maybe that you weren't expecting? I don't know. I mean, everything
I
seems
think
unexpected. Yeah.
my initial gut reaction to that question is what surprised me the most was how routine anything can become. The human mind is a
Interesting.
fascinating, a
Yeah.
fascinating organism, and what we can adapt to, what we can normalize, in our personal and professional spheres, from emotion to rituals to routines to the execution of our job functions. Uh, Initially might seem so extraordinary and so otherworldly, anything can become part of your everyday rituals and routines, especially if you are very intentional about pushing the boundaries of your comfort zone, being a lifelong learner, having the humility to not just accept constructive feedback from trusted peers, but, and teammates, but to crave it, to always want to be learning how I can do it better, because it's not about you, it's about the team, it's about the mission and putting that before your own selfish needs and desires. So if you go through that continual mindset shift, that type of constructive feedback, even criticism, isn't just acceptable or we don't just begrudgingly kind of say, yeah, just if you got any feedback, send it, but you
Yeah.
don't really mean it. No, you're
Yeah.
like, no, what can we keep doing? What can we do to keep getting better?
Wow, that's crazy. And I don't think a lot of people understand that component of what you're talking about, because even in my work as a, soft skills coach, if you will, I talk about, in organizations, create a culture of feedback because now
Yep.
my came from watching fighter pilots, and how I think a similar mentality is that you got to get the feedback. You got to look at the hard stuff. You've got to, you got to get it and but it's part of the culture. So it's
Mhm.
a little bit less rare that somebody give you a bunch of shit because you gave them some feedback, right?
Yeah, we actually have a couple fighter pilots on our leadership team at
Oh,
Accelerate.
okay.
And for those listening, Accelerate, we're a fully integrated hybrid of enterprise management consulting and B2B software. But one of those guys, for example, that popped into mind when you said that, his name is Patrick Houlihan, former Top Gun fighter pilot
Oh
and
my.
Top Gun instructor. So you're talking about the best
Yeah.
of the best of the best of the best. And I remember interesting story to support the notion of what you just said about
Mm.
the mindset within that community. Uh, it was that after the first time I ever worked with them, we were kicking off, a big new client. We were out in executive meetings with this client and actually starting to engage in some of the training and software onboarding and things like that. And the day went great. Afterwards, we sat down to practice what we preach and do a debrief and talk about what went well, where we could improve, usually just, little things, little tweaks here and there. And I remember he sat down and he's like, all right, like literally pen in hand, notepad out, glasses on. He's like, what do you got for me? Like dead serious. I was like, no, I mean, Patrick, I thought you did great. You're really just blowing smoke, just like,
Yeah.
because he did. He did a great job.
Right.
And he's like, no, 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 forget all that bullshit. He's
Yeah.
like, what do you got for me? He took his glasses off and threw them on the table. He's like, what do you got? Meaning like,
Wow.
where can I improve? Like he
Yeah.
needed to hear it. You see this with Olympic athletes. You see this with the upper echelons and, in the
Yeah.
fighter pilot community and naval special warfare branches of, obviously in the same thing with high performing entrepreneurs and, leaders out there in the world. They crave constructive feedback. They have to know what they're doing
Yeah.
wrong, where they can improve, which, I mean, is a great mindset to have because
Yeah.
rarely will you get your feathers ruffled by getting feedback, and people know that that's a part of your personality and your leadership identity as well. So that creates a culture within your team that is not just an acceptable behavior and way of thinking, but it's part of our guiding principles as an organization.
Very interesting. Now, I'll say that the work that I've done and done quite a bit of work with upper level managers and C-suites. And one of the things I complain about to myself, and sometimes to them, is this massive ego that they have, and therefore are not able to move beyond where they're at because most of the time it just comes down to ego. And so my question to you is, you know, I guess I'm of the mindset, first of all, that, people, let's just say on SEAL teams or special operators, let's say pilots, on the one hand, you have to have a big ego. I mean, you have to have this confidence, this almost cocky confidence. Now, and I could be wrong about this, so I'm just putting my perspective out there, to be able to do what you do. But on the other hand, to your point, you also gotta, and you mentioned it, have some humility and understand when to take it in and when you screwed up or whatever the case might be. So my question is how do you, and therefore how do leaders balance that notion, if I'm relatively correct about my assertion?
Yeah, a couple things there in our work as well, with organizations. Sometimes you do see very seemingly successful leaders who also have a big fat ego. It is frankly kind of shocking how they've gotten to where they are with
Agree.
such a great ego. And sometimes it's an evolutionary process. It didn't start out that way.
Okay.
And they've actually drank too much of their own Kool-Aid, and therefore now they have a big ego. And sometimes it's the flip side of that coin where they started off pretty humble, and then over time, due to being humbled along the way and things like that, they
Hmm.
started with an ego and have become less or so. But in the SEAL teams, regardless of what your initial drive, purpose, and passion was to pursue that professional endeavor, if you will, or career path. And everybody's different. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, you can look at documentaries and movies and all that stuff, and from the outside looking in, it might not look like a very diverse organization, but it actually is. Just the military is in general. People from
100%.
all kinds of different backgrounds, educationally, financially, economically, geopolitically, everything.
Yeah.
You get D1 athletes who quit minute one of buds or
Yeah.
Hell Week, and you've
Yeah.
got people who've never swam in the ocean who kick your ass in the 2 mile ocean swim. You're like,
Yeah.
it's a fascinating level playing field, an extraordinary social experiment. But the number one thing that you learn is humility. And that humility drives an improvement and escalation of your emotional intelligence. Or you begin with improving your emotional intelligence, then adopt a more humble approach to life and work. But it is that humility that opens up that sense of self-awareness required, foundationally required, so that you can accept feedback from trusted peers and advisors, be coachable, be able to be a good mentee if you have a mentor, those types of things that apply to our personal and professional lives. And that's one of the biggest things you take away is the critical importance of not just accountability, discipline, extreme ownership, mental toughness, but is the humility required to be a lifelong learner. It's very hard to be a
Wow.
lifelong learner and in a continuous state of improvement if you're the smartest person in the room in your own mind. But
100%.
high performers always know they're not the smartest person in the room. If they are, they're in the wrong room. And so they go to a different room or surround themselves with people who have frankly achieved extraordinary outcomes in areas that they want to pursue. So they always, and I know I've tried to practice this a lot in my professional career and even my personal life, is surround myself with not people who can meet me where I'm at, but people who are far superior to me in every aspect, like
Wow.
my wife, or a lot of people on my
And
advisory
then,
board, or on our
yeah.
team at Accelerate, or our
Yeah.
investors. Things for people who have done great things in the areas that I know I need to improve in. And that's where I think a lot of people learn to thrive is by eliminating, and that's, we'll get into it in a little bit, but one of the foundational premises of the book All In is about going through a shedding process, a decluttering process, a cleansing process within your life so that we're focusing
Oh,
on a few key professional priorities, a few key personal priorities, a few key wellness practices, a few key relationships. Being all in is about being all in on a few key areas, and investing our God-given time, talent, and energy in only the activities, pursuits, and routines that will drive mission success in those few key areas. And
man.
therefore, that requires us to learn to say no, which
So,
as we age, we get better at that because we just
yeah.
give fewer F's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
when we're
Yeah, that's
younger, we
right.
want to say yes to everything and we're chasing the shiny
Yeah,
objects and the good idea
yeah,
fairy comes and
yeah,
sits on our shoulder as entrepreneurs. We're like, yes, let's do that. Every opportunity is a
yeah.
great opportunity, which of
Been
course,
there, done that. Yeah. So let's jump in on all in. You've kind of described it already, but I'm going to ask again just to get us moving here. What is all in, generally speaking, in your mind? What is all in?
so the book title, All In, The Pathway to Personal Growth and Professional Excellence, it is based on a continuous improvement and accountability framework that we've actually developed at Accelerate. We've implemented both in our software and in organizations and their operating rhythms. But it originally was birthed from the concept that I wrote about in my previous book, Embrace the Suck, around personal transformation. So going from your current state to your desired future state, which, as we know, in personal growth, even professional growth, it's never a destination, or at least
Yeah.
it should not be. It's a continuous journey. And real briefly, the remarkable results pyramid model has 5 layers to it. You're looking at current state and future state, but at the top you have your results. So it's best to look at your current state first to analyze where you are before you can really identify how you need to get to where you want to go. But that's just your current results. What am I achieving currently in my marriage, as a parent, in my professional career, in my health and wellness practices, fitness regimens, out in my community, whatever your pursuits are. Most likely in your current state, those pursuits probably need to be narrowed a little bit. And the second tier to the pyramid, the second layer is your systems, systems and processes that you've used to date, hopefully by design, to achieve your existing desired outcomes. And then below that is where you get into your existing degree of commitment to your mission, to your purpose, to your business, your relationships, your marriage, your kids, your family, and asking yourself, has my degree of commitment in these key critical areas been enough? And if you're really developing continually a mindset of extreme ownership, the answer is always going to be no. Not to the degree it should be. There's always ways we can make incremental improvements. There's always ways we can be a better husband, a more present parent, a better founder and CEO and servant leader to our team. And then below that, of course, then is mindset. So, what is the mindset that I've hopefully continued to develop and evolve through learning and feedback, some of the things we've just talked about that have gotten to me to where I am today in some of those key pursuits. And then below that is the routines or rituals, if you will, that you execute on a consistent or at least semi-consistent basis. That's where you start to shore things up, make some improvements that have helped you develop the mindset and the way of thinking about your life and work that you have today, that leads into your existing degree of commitment to your mission and your purpose. That leads then into how you have been disciplined or not in the adherence to certain systems that you have before you, and that leads you to the outcomes you've achieved. So in that growth process, then you want to look at, all right, in each of those key areas, am I focusing on the right things? What do I need to start doing? What do I need to stop doing? Where can I elevate and continue doing certain things to ensure that I've got the right model and framework, not to be a good leader of myself and others today, but what type of identity transformation do I need to go through to be the person I need to become to achieve those desired outcomes in those few key areas of personal and relationships and professional excellence and pursuits and your career goals
Yeah.
and aspirations and health, wellness, fitness, whatever your categories are, your faith, anything like that. But it does involve foundationally narrowing your focus and eliminating everything else that is purely just either a waste of time or a distraction from achieving daily progress towards those goals.
Do you first figure out like, where am I going with everything? Where's my life going? Do you start with that?
Yeah,
If
I
you're
think
talking
you
about
should.
personal development, I mean, I guess you could say the same
Yeah.
thing with professional development is, figuring out maybe your career path or where it is you want to land or something like this. And then you start looking at these different areas that contribute or don't contribute, i.e., getting down to those handful of things that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've applied this new rule to my life over the past couple of years of I want to look at even 6 months into the past and cringe at that version of myself. So
Oh,
that requires me to be in a rapid and constant state of evolution. I say that with great humility, but it's just kind of
sure.
a model that I've put in place and started to adopt. It's my version
Fascinating.
of my own remarkable results pyramid because it's not a one size fits all. You make it your own. But I want to look back 6 months and be like, ugh, you know, I can't believe I was living like that. I can't believe I was leading my business that way. I can't believe that's the type of husband I was 6 months ago or parent that I was 6 months ago. So not 3 years ago, but 6 months ago. So again,
Wow.
we're talking about small improvements, but
Sure.
those small tweaks adding up day after day, week after week, month after month lead to those remarkable results and transformations that we're talking about. For me, sometimes, like all of us, it's an unforeseen obstacle or adversity that ignites that
Mm,
moment of reflection or moments of reflection. For me, a couple of years ago, it was we lost my dad unexpectedly, out of the blue, former Marine,
mm.
commercial real estate developer, incredible career, but guy's 80 years old and still working. He was
Wow.
retired and then became, instead of being a commercial real estate investment advisory professional, he became a developer. I'm like, it seems like the opposite
That's
direction.
crazy.
You're 10 times busier than you were
That's right.
when you were working. Now
Yeah.
you're retired and doing
Wow.
way more. But he liked three things. He liked family, fitness, and work. That's it. And
Interesting.
so no additional hobbies. I mean, I don't know where I got it. So no
Right.
hobbies, no other things. It's just those things.
Mm,
And so, or at least, for the time being, and it's the same thing in my, current state of my life, but he had had a pre-existing heart condition, but it wasn't really slowing him down, but he was on medication and blood thinners. But one day he, as we do sometimes, he overexerted himself, or at least that's
mm.
the assessment, had a fall, hit his head, became an inoperable brain bleed, and 17 hours later he was gone.
Oh, man.
But listen to this part of the story. By the grace of God, I just happened to be in Dallas, where I grew up, where they still live. Twin brother still lives there with his wife, some other extended family. We have a lot of clients, investors there, so I'm there once a month, for work. Not always on the same schedule or routine, but I'm there so frequently and oftentimes in and out that I'm not always giving my parents a head up. Let him in town because I probably won't be able to see him anyway. And so that was one of those trips. My mom didn't know I was in town. My phone started blowing up while I was in meetings with the CEO of one of our biggest clients. They're also an investor in our business. And afterwards, I stepped aside and I looked. I thought I was just on some stupid, text chain with
Yeah.
fraternity brothers or, SEAL
Mm,
teammates. And it was actually my mom giving us the news that my dad had fallen. He's in the hospital and he's in critical condition and may not survive. And we lost him the next day, got to spend the last 15 hours
oh,
by his side. But it caused, and again, a lot of combat veterans, especially, are no strangers to death and loss. But when it's the loss of a, immediate family member, a parent, a
yeah.
sibling, a child, God forbid, or things of that nature, it does ignite a sense of reflection and thinking about our own mortality and
That's
looking
right.
again, which we never do, is that quick understanding or realization that time is our most valuable commodity, yet we spend it every day without ever knowing the balance in our account. And so that caused some reflection on, okay, yeah, sure, maybe I've achieved some degree of what some might consider to be success in the professional spheres and in my entrepreneurial endeavors or as an author or speaker or things like that. And I was a pretty good husband and a good dad, but I was like, wow, I mean, there's definitely some things that I could be doing a lot better. And there's
Mm,
definitely some bad habits that I need to address immediately. There's definitely some areas that I do pretty good that I could elevate, but I have to clear a path to make time and room and open up my cognitive bandwidth to adopt some new routines, new rituals, really chip away at some bad habits. And one of the things that I did, and I don't preach this, but it was a huge part of this catalyst that led to my transformation. So everything I wrote in the new book, All In, I have lived for the past 2 years. And thank God it
mm.
works. So it's not a pile of BS. It
Right.
actually works. But one of those things that landed on the stop doing list was for me was alcohol. I wasn't a drunk in a ditch somewhere, but I was definitely abusing alcohol and drinking on a daily basis. And we make all kinds of extraordinary excuses and and reasonings as to, well, I'm highly functioning, so this is fine. It's not a big deal. I can stop whenever I want. I just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Things like that. But if I really, and excuse me, when I really actually went through a deep sense of reflection and actually listening to some of the feedback that I was getting from my wife or, friends or things like that, and then comparing that to other people that I deeply respected, going back to what we talked about before, like entrepreneurs and veterans who've become successful entrepreneurs and people even who are on my advisory board, who are investors and close friends, who have done things like eliminate alcohol, not because they were have hit rock bottom. None of the people that I'm talking about ever hit rock bottom. They're just always seeking a constant pursuit of perfection. That's the definition of excellence. And they're looking at what's holding me back, what bottlenecks, blockages, or bad habits, what am I doing to myself that I could eliminate that will open up the pathways to better relationships, better professional pursuits. And for me, one of those things, there was a longer list, but one of those things was alcohol. And right then and there, I decided to stop drinking. Haven't had a drop of alcohol in
Wow.
2 years. Ironically, here's the book.
There it
The day
is.
the book comes out, which is next week. I know we're recording this, but next week, Tuesday, December 2nd, to the day. This is just
Wow.
really interesting. To the day will be 2 years
Wow.
of sobriety. So
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's that's no small thing to turn down something that can become very much a part of your life. And like you said, if you're high functioning or whatever, you just I'm fine.
yeah.
But so a couple of questions I have for you that I'm thinking about here. One is about potential, understanding what potential is. But the second question, I suppose it could be related, and that is that, well, let me start with potential. What is, you know, how do you define human potential? What would how do you define that in your way of thinking?
I think that every person, that's ever existed has the potential, I'll use the term, but we're not supposed to use the term in the definition, but
But
I'll
I'm
circle back to
tracking.
answering your question
You're good
appropriately.
about it. Yeah.
uh, is has the opportunity to be the hero of their own story, write their own story, be the hero of that story, and really tap into our God-given talent that we all have. That all falls into different categories, but human potential is also neatly bundled into the human condition, which obviously has many different facets of it. But when you
Yes.
think about human potential and you think about how people pursue goals, why they pursue goals, sort of the behavioral psychology that goes into the different extrinsic and intrinsic motivating factors of achieving our full potential. Again, it's different for every single person,
Yeah.
personally and professionally. I think a lot of us initially we get it wrong. We think about the grind and the grit necessary to achieve big goals, and we set impossible goals and we try to pursue those things, or we surround ourselves accidentally with the wrong people that we think will help us go down this path that we want instead, or we spend too much time ruminating about our own potential and our purpose and our path instead of taking action. It's not by sitting here. Yes, I deeply believe in literally daily reflection, and daily meditation and prayer and thought on what I'm achieving, what do I need to achieve. But oftentimes we fall too much into considering what our potential is, considering what that path might be, considering what our purpose and why is, to a
Yeah.
point it's just cliche, as opposed to identifying a couple paths and starting to execute in a manner that will help us gather the right insight, data, and feedback to know that, okay, is this the path I want to continue to pursue? Am I actually passionate about this? Or is this not the right path? But again, we also have to be careful about that. And I hear this sometimes from the young men, for example, that I've started to mentor, sometimes not catching them early enough in their journey. But, I'll have, clients' sons who are going, oh, he's just about to check into buds. And can you talk to him? And, you never know what people's backgrounds are, but they are trying to fulfill what they believe their potential is. They're trying to
Yeah.
fulfill a purpose or a path, or they're passionate about exploring this opportunity, if you will. And when sometimes they don't make it or they voluntarily drop, which most people do, totally fine. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But they say things like, I realized quick early on that this actually isn't the path, that I want to pursue. Sometimes that's authentic, and sometimes it's an excuse for why
Excuse, right.
they didn't have enough grit to continue down the path. First obstacle they hit, they stop moving forward. And so that's where I would caution any of us, myself included, is to when you're on that path to realizing what your full potential is, realizing what your purpose is, taking action every single day in the right areas to move the needle forward on that exploratory process. Because it's not just all of a sudden one day we wake up and realize, oh my God, I know what my why is. I know what my purpose is. I know my values. I know the pursuits I need. Some people have it. My oldest son has always wanted to be a firefighter, and he's a firefighter. So he's gifted
Wow.
in that area. The rest of us are wandering around aimlessly trying to figure this out, hopefully taking action in the right areas.
True.
But
Yeah.
but the only piece of caution there is don't just label this as, oh, this isn't my path. This isn't my purpose. This isn't the potential I should be trying to fulfill when you hit those first couple obstacles. You know you're growing when you hit those obstacles. And when you start feeling things like um, imposter syndrome or questioning the path when it starts to get hard, that's sometimes when you know you're on the right path. And if it's not wrought with potholes or discomfort or pain, suffering, and anxiety, it's probably not that big of a goal in the first place. Or it's probably not something that's deeply rooted in what should be your potential or should be your purpose. It's going to come with discomfort. It has to. And if it doesn't, you're not really moving forward in a meaningful way.
Yeah, boy, that's so well said, Brent. My goodness gracious, there's a nugget that you just dropped. A bunch of them actually. So now I'm thinking about this idea of, first of all, I feel like I come across too many young people who don't even think about potential, and maybe that's not an unusual thing. I don't know. I mean, and they might pursue something because it seems sexy or a whole myriad of reasons.
Right.
But I often wonder if, and I say young people, maybe it's not just young people, do people stand back and say, what actually can I get done here? What can I accomplish? How, can I push these boundaries and be successful? And so, gee, I'm not even sure what the question is, but I'm asking about the notion um, of how people should think about their potential and then pursuing their potential.
It's actually funny. I know this obviously wasn't rehearsed, but one of the first things I wrote about in the new book, All In, was the psychology behind why we choose the goals and pursuits that we do.
Oh, wow.
And there's obviously some fascinating underlying elements there that, of course, go back to our upbringing, we're products of our environment,
Mhm.
things like that. But once we know that, though, the more fascinating element is that we can design our environment to set ourselves up for
Oh,
success
boy.
in all of the most important areas.
Mm.
So by knowing the psychology behind, okay, well, I am the way that I am. If you're willing to obviously tap into it, do some deep reflection on this is how I am personally, and my identity and my routines and the things I spend time in that are good and the things I waste time in that are not so good, and how I manage relationships and my professional career. All of that to some degree stems from our upbringing and the experiences that we've had time and time again throughout our lives, for better or worse. But at the same time, knowing that, we can open up new neural pathways through very specific purposeful routines and habit building activities,
Interesting.
shaping our environment. So our environment in the workplace, our environment at home, is by design. And you absolutely can do that. Obviously, that's not
Yeah.
just coming from me, that's coming from all types of psychological studies. And James Clear writes about it in Atomic Habits.
Mhm.
And I write about it in All In as far as like habit building routines. You can use that same framework to break bad habits as well. So when it comes to like behavioral psychology of shaping your environment and building better routines, there's, when it comes to habit formation, there's the cue, the routine and the reward. So
Mm.
cue for those of us or who at least used to consume alcohol on a regular basis.
Mhm.
The cue might be, well, it's into my workday. I've earned a drink, so it's 5, 6, 7 o'clock, whatever the time is, doesn't really matter. That's the cue. It's the time of day. That's just
Yeah.
when your brain is normalizing when you would engage in that activity. And then the routine is you drink. And then the reward is, oh, you feel good, a little bit less stressed, but it's not really a reward because then you feel like shit later.
Yeah. That's right.
We won't go down that path, but the same thing applies to breaking bad habits. You have that cue, for example, end of the day. You have the routine, which maybe used to be drinking. Well, now how about putting your workout in that time slot or going for a long walk with your wife, and then you're getting all
Mhm.
these additional benefits and points, in the
Yeah.
husband category. And then the reward is actually a dopamine spike from fitness, and more
Mm.
time spent in a meaningful way, and the benefits also of not feeling like shit or getting tired or, putting poison in your body.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not preaching, I'm just saying that's just as an example.
Yeah.
So you can use these same models
Mm.
that are how we build bad habits to break those habits and also use that exact same framework to build better habits, and therefore also designing your environment so that it's only focused on what you want to. Like in my office, it's very Spartan existence here. There's a whiteboard, there's monitors, there's some books. That's it. There's no other distractions. And same thing, like, with your fitness endeavors or, how you engage in learning, all those things can be done by design. The people you surround yourself with, the content that you digest, if you design that specifically to continue to evolve your identity towards what you want to accomplish, I mean, there's really no stopping it.
Wow, that's incredible. It's funny that just as you just described your office space, it just kind of sunk in. I went, "Oh, okay, I get that. Designing, you designed it to be what you want and need, and
Oh yeah,
therefore
there's a
now you
couple family pictures too. So I
yeah,
don't want
yeah, yeah.
to
But
get
I mean, for God's sakes, you got to have at least a picture of your wife up there. But yes, but then you can use that same idea design other parts of your life, if you will. Brent, is there I guess I could assume this, but I'll ask, is there a difference between designing routines versus habits, or routines and habits, I should say? What's the difference between
The routines that we design intentionally, like, I know it, even mentioning it is now falls into the bucket of being pretty cliche, but again, this isn't some new age thing like the early morning routine. Marcus Aurelius writes about it in Meditation. This goes all the way back to the beginning of time, where great leaders, and responsible members of society typically, upon reflection, realize that the only time they're going to have for meaningful, isolated time to pray and meditate and reflect or engage in fitness activities or prepare themselves for the day is pre-dawn,
Hmm.
especially when you have a chaotic work life, you're married, you have children running around the house, things like that. And so these pre-dawn rituals are known, proven models and frameworks
Mm.
that people can engage in before the day starts, to prepare yourself mentally, physically, cognitively, for the day before you step onto the battlefield. And so that is a routine, however you want to design it. So for me, I break my routine. I was inspired by Robin Sharma's book, the 5 a.m. Club, and he calls it the 20-20-20 formula. So I break that first hour. So for me, I get up a little before 5. So from 5 to 6 is my early morning routine. And so I break that into 20-minute segments. And again, that rule of thumb, you're not looking at your phone or your laptop or devices of any kind before you engage in this routine. That comes afterwards. That's
Mm.
only going to drive distraction or potentially stress, maybe some jubilation if you get a good email. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
it's distraction from the purpose behind having that intentional morning routine, which is to prepare yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally
Yeah.
and cognitively to step onto the battlefield to be a great leader of yourself and others in every category. And so that's for me, it's 20 minutes of a wellness activity. So that's for me, it's cold plunging, then stretching. Then I go into 20 minutes of some sort of learning, like listening to a podcast or listening to a book or reading, and then 20 minutes of prayer and reflection. And so that then wraps up my morning routine. And then, I obviously can delve into the day. The house erupts in chaos, or I go to the office, whatever it is. So it's routines that build the habits, and the habits that build incremental improvement
Gotcha.
towards success in those key areas of your life.
Gotcha. Very, very interesting. So well said, because, by the way, habits can form without any intention, but you are suggesting, of course, that at least I say you're implying at least that routines are deliberate, they're intentional, and you develop them, and then they become habits after a certain period of creating that neural pathway or
Right.
whatever it might
And
be.
then once you build these good habits, it requires no cognitive bandwidth to engage in that activity. And so you save that cognitive bandwidth for problem solvings or conflict resolution or other, things that will require your immediate attention throughout the day. But when we have good habits built by good routines, that also gives us a little bit of a identity transformation based on the design of those routines that lead to better habits that elevates our mindset and way of thinking towards those key areas. And then it gives us better discipline to adhere to, I should say, strictly adhere to the systems that we need to put in place or have in place, because there's a difference between routines and systems. It's the systems, then, the frameworks, the models that we will then follow to achieve better and better outcomes. So you have the routines that evolve your mindset and identity. Your identity that continues to evolve elevates your level of commitment to the purpose and mission of those key pursuits. And then that will give you the discipline necessary to follow the systems necessary to achieve
Wow.
better outcomes.
Wow. That's good. Let me ask about limiting beliefs. It's a term's been out there forever, but I imagine, I'm even thinking about like you as an operator out there in the middle of some really hellish scenario, um, and thinking, shit, we may not make this or whatever. Do, do do you have any just general comments about limiting beliefs and how they hold us back, but more importantly, how we overcome them? Because I think a lot of people
Yeah.
suffer from this, from just,
Oh, we all do.
yeah, we
Well,
all do, but I
I think
think,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead,
Well,
please.
no, the important thing is just that we all suffer from that. There's
Mm,
sometimes that notion that those people who've achieved the utmost success in key categories, you're typically only hearing about the end of their journey. You're not
interesting.
really hearing about that 17-year overnight success.
Yeah,
You're just hearing
that's,
about the overnight success part. You're like, oh my
yeah, yeah,
God, they're so lucky, or they do all
yeah,
these great
yeah.
things, and
Wow, look at
how do they
them.
have these skills that I don't have, and all blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah. It's all just a
interesting.
bunch of
Yeah,
bullshit and excuses.
yeah.
Again, going back to the conversation around potential, we all have potential to uh, put routines and systems in place to achieve extraordinary results in any pursuit that we put in place. All of us have that potential. But we also are all plagued, kind of going back to the human condition, with limiting beliefs, with the voices in our head that tell us, and these are based on experiences that we've had throughout our lives, how we've been coached and parented and mentored throughout our lives, the types of things that people have told us, that limit, ourselves to these preconceived notions of what I can do and what I can't do. And one of the things that, we train a lot, with our clients at Accelerate. It's embedded into our in various fashions in our enterprise software, but some of the work that Carol Dweck has done around growth mindset versus fixed mindset. When people ask me if I had to pick one trait that is authentically inherent in every student that successfully navigates SEAL training, for example, is the growth mindset every single time.
100%.
Forget all the discipline and the
Yeah.
accountability and extreme ownership and all that stuff. They have a growth mindset, like authentically have a growth mindset, meaning every category, and she breaks it down in some really fascinating categories around, looking at setbacks and obstacles, how we perceive failure, how
Hmm.
we look at constructive criticism, how we
Hmm.
look at even the success of other people in teams, where
Hmm.
fixed mindset, and this can exist in an individual, in a team, or an entire organization, culturally speaking. And high-performing organizations obviously continue to strive for a growth mindset environment, whereas other teams and organizations or individuals just allow themselves to exist, in mediocrity, if you will, which is kind
Yeah.
of the foundation of a fixed mindset. But I say mediocrity a little bit tongue in cheek because these are things we can actively work on. But fixed mindset individuals kind of have that thought that I am who I am. I am who God made me. I have my strengths. I have my weaknesses.
There you
There's no
go.
need to develop in any areas, going to
Yeah.
the theme of your entire
Yep.
show, because it will not result in a positive outcome. Whereas
Yeah.
growth-minded individuals see every one of those categories, every setback, every obstacle, every piece of constructive criticism, even the success of other people, teams, or organizations or their competitors as opportunities to learn, grow, and execute. And so if we can continue to put, again, routines in place to learn to evolve our emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
our self-awareness, and our discipline towards having at least more of a growth mindset, more of a tendency towards growth-minded thinking, then you're going to see measurable improvements in every area of your life.
Wow. Man, that is so well said. And the and I also caution people about thinking about things like growth mindset versus fixed mindset, that it's not this pure mutually exclusive idea that you're either fixed or growth, but that there are people, for instance, that that let's say they have an optimistic mindset. They, you know, they believe in it, but maybe things that they learned along the way, maybe something their father told them how stupid they were for the longest time, and therefore they've got this mindset and they can't, but they perceive that, no, they know, they're aware that it's holding them back. So it becomes this sort of, so it's not just, hey, screw it, that's just the way that I am. They're like, wow, I really feel like I could do a lot more, but, I'm just, it just doesn't seem to be happening or something like that. And part of what I hear you saying in my own words is, and I like to do this, I practice mediation in some of my work. And one of the things I've learned about settlements, getting to a settlement, is that and this is the simple practice that I've applied, and that is, okay, it looks like this is a no deal. It's goner. And I say, okay, Kevin, try one more time. Just try one more thing. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've done that. And suddenly we're talking a settlement here. And I'm like, wow, 15 minutes ago, these people were about to choke each other. One was heading out the door. And here now they're talking a settlement. And so I'm using the same idea with a growth mindset, with, by the way, human potential. Just try one more time. Just try again. Am I making sense? I mean, is this
Yeah.
resonating with you?
Yeah, a couple of things there. Like I was smiling because that notion of compromise means both parties will be moderately disappointed in the outcome,
Correct.
but it's still compromise, and
It's
there's
still a compromise.
both parties can be moderately happy with the
Yeah.
outcome. But also, I like that you brought that up because it is a very important thing for people and teams to understand when that notion of growth mindset sounds really sexy and like, ooh, I want some of that.
Mm,
But it's situational. I mean, we can be
fair enough.
very growth minded in a key area of our professional sphere or personal life because we have confidence and we've built confidence over time in those key areas. For me right now, for example, in transitioning, my company from traditional, enterprise management consulting to B2B enterprise software and now becoming a hybrid, that put me uh, substantially outside my comfort zone, being
Wow.
what is kind of a derogatory term, but I'm a non-tech founder, meaning I'm not an engineer. If you know how to lead, you can hire all the smart people and then take credit for their work. That's leadership 101.
There you
But
go.
at the end of the day, um, that's intentional and that was by design.
Yeah.
And so going back real quickly, this is part of my answer to your question and the thought is that, so what did I do? Well, I knew that was going to be extremely uncomfortable. I knew I was going to be facing a
Oh, yeah.
lot of evenings with deep levels of imposter syndrome setting in. Little voices saying, you have no idea what you're doing. Oh my God, what if you land this big new customer or this thing pops off? You're not going to know what to do next. So what? Good. These are good problems to have.
Yeah.
But so what did I do? Well, one thing is I looked at, okay, who can I spend more time with that's already in my sphere of friends and colleagues and even clients, customers,
Wow.
investors, where I can waste less time over here and spend more time with these friends who have done this. They've been there. They
Wow.
built great companies in tech and software. And and then what types of content do I need to start to digest to align myself more into the tech realm? So listening to the right podcast, not listening or reading this material, but spending all my time learning about new things and spending my time with the people that have been there, done that in those key categories. So therefore, I'm going through an identity transformation, going from this type of entrepreneur to a new type of leader, building a new type of organization, which requires me to learn new things and speak a new language to be able to talk intelligently with investors and VCs and my own team. Like, well, I have no idea what you just said. If you could
Yeah,
just
but
dial it back down
just,
to English, that would be
yeah, yeah,
fantastic. But
yeah.
over time, even I know this sounds kind of, it's actually funny because I was, my mother-in-law was asking me some questions the other day. She's like, wow, you're really passionate about this. You sound super technical. I'm like, I have no idea what I just
I
said. But
just said, yeah,
anyway, I know
just
it sounded good, right?
spit it out.
And
Yeah.
so
Wow, that's
it,
cool.
well, but it goes into just continually pushing the boundaries. But again, being careful about
Yeah.
that notion. We're not talking about discomfort for the sake of discomfort. We're talking about intentional growth, intentional, um, comfort zone boundary pushing, because these are things that you have to do if you want to open up the doors for success. And along that path too, there will be things that you have to do that you just frankly don't like doing, whether that's as an entrepreneur or as a professional or in your relationships. But it's a key factor to success in that area. Therefore, you better lean into that thing,
Wow.
and start getting more comfortable, being uncomfortable, to plug that saying in.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that thing becomes normal and it becomes something you might even enjoy. There's
That's
always been areas in
embracing.
my professional career of things that I don't really like doing that part of being a founder, but I got to do it, or I got to prep for this QBR or this board meeting I know is going to suck. But hey, once you lean more into that, all of a sudden you might even start enjoying doing some of the things you didn't like before. I
That's
feel like I
great.
got off on a little bit of a tangent, but
No, no,
hopefully
no,
that
no.
gives you more
You
insight.
beautifully, really, really so well explained what you even talked about much earlier, and that is the notion of one, incremental improvement, small incremental improvement that, and you spoke about later on that those small steps that you're taking, that small amount of improvement leads you to an understanding, even down to, is this something I want to do? You
Yeah.
see, I mean, because when you lack the knowledge, you might look at this from a business sense, why this would be really great, but then the more you forge, the more you get ahead, the more you just start to learn. You start to learn what you can do, what you can't do, what you're capable of understanding. Because I'd be afraid of simply just like you said, I'd be afraid of not understanding what the hell my own people are talking about. I'm like, what did he just say? And
Well, even when you start socializing these ideas for
yeah,
feedback, and I remember, one friend of mine, he's a software guy, founder, and I started socializing this idea. This is like a few years ago, and I was like, I'm thinking about transferring my company into tech, at least tech enabling or full enterprise SaaS. And basically, he was trying to steer me away from it. He's like, it's really hard. It's very different than what you're doing. And I was like, now I'm definitely doing
definitely
it. So that's not necessarily a
the
mature way of
ceiling you
thinking,
came
or
out.
a good way to do it. But it's the same thing with like when I decided like I'm
Yeah,
going to quit finance
yeah,
and try out for the SEAL program. People are like, you're an idiot.
yeah.
You're
Wow.
when you fail, you're going to be stuck in the Navy for like 4 or 5 years and derail your career and all the things. And I was like, okay, now I know I'm all in.
Wow. So two more questions that I can think of. One is I want to ask you, well, the next question I'm going to ask you is what can you tell us about All In that you haven't that you would like to talk about that you haven't that I haven't asked questions about. But before that, I want to just ask you this. So you let's say you have a person, a professional, a team, a leader, whatever it is, and they're just generally stuck in their life, in their routine. They wake up in the morning. Again, doesn't to me it doesn't matter the scenario and go, oh man, I'm not I'm not digging this. What's going on here? Where do
Yeah.
they go? What do they
It,
do?
I mean, all of that, if you had to boil it down in its simplest form, comes from a sense of complacency. And that complacency is driven by, and complacency is often, to your point, paired with a lack of willingness to get out
Mm,
of that rut.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, I know that I'm not in the best place right now, but it's also kind of comfortable. I'm enjoying this degree of mediocrity because the alternative would be discomfort, and I'm not really into that idea right
yes,
now.
that happened in COVID to a massive amount of people, didn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
But
Anyways,
at the end of the day, as we all, I think, intellectually understand, we can't exist like that to
mm,
achieve true happiness and fulfillment in key
mhm,
areas of our life. But it's got to be that willingness to take that first step to reignite some sense, even if it's just an iota of
oh,
urgency and
wow,
willingness to break that barrier a little bit, try
yeah,
something different. Obviously, what you're doing consistently is why you're stuck.
yeah,
So getting good feedback, having some trusted peers or advisors or a mentor, help you work through what you need to stop doing, what you potentially need to start doing, and just taking incremental steps, actions every single day
I love
to
it.
start digging yourself out of that rut. But again, it goes back to finding a way, there's not one perfect solution to this, but finding a way, again, through feedback, through learning, through reflection, not for too long, reflection and action at the same
Yeah.
time,
I love
continuous
it.
loops. But
100%.
but then taking enough action to have the right type of data, insight, and feedback to know that, okay, now I'm going, in a better direction. But it is finding a way to ignite a healthy sense of urgency, not just urgency for the sake of urgency, but urgency going back to realizing that yes, time is finite. Like what I said before, we don't know when our final day is. And having a little bit of reflection on our own mortality is a very healthy thing. What do I want to accomplish in my remaining days or years or decades, whatever it ends up being? And I'm not talking about a bucket list of dumb shit you want to do
Right.
before you die. I'm talking about
Right.
meaningful impact that you want to
Meaningful
have.
impact.
And what I wrote about in Embrace the Suck is in the last chapter is about managing that list of regrets you're going to have on, that final day.
Oh, interesting.
If you have any reflective moments or the opportunity to have
Yeah.
reflective
Yeah.
moments on your final day. If not, same philosophy applies. Start
Yeah.
now. But
Yeah.
managing that list of regrets. Literally, I created a model in the book, like what do I not want to regret when it comes to family and career and health and wellness and my relationships and the impact that I have in my community or on others. These are things like, oh wow, it forces you to go through a process of realization that helps you realize again, where am I just wasting my time doing dumb stuff? Scrolling on social media or gossiping with friends, all these things that add no value. And in
Yeah.
fact, they inject a little bit of toxicity typically into our lives,
Fair
but
enough.
they're absolutely, at the very least, time wasting activities that will not drive any meaningful progress towards pursuits that you actually will bring you real fulfillment,
Wow.
not meaningless in the moment dopamine spikes, but real
Right.
meaningful, lasting fulfillment for yourself and most importantly,
Wow.
for others.
I
And
love what
so
you're saying.
one, if you don't mind, actually, and I really hope people read the book all the way through. But my favorite, actually, part of the book, and writing a book and launching a book is a very emotionally volatile journey. And by the time the book is about to come out, you're like, oh my God, are people going to like
Yeah.
it?
Oh, I know.
The best thing to do is just never look at it again, and
Yeah.
definitely don't read the reviews,
Yeah.
even if they're good. But
I
one part
agree.
is it's actually in the epilogue. The epilogue subtitle is Dream Big, Start Small, Act Now.
Mm.
And I put a quote here by Franklin D. Roosevelt at the beginning of this chapter. It says, the only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. Kind of going to your point about limiting beliefs. But the subtitle of part of this very brief chapter, it's only a few pages, the final chapter before the epilogue, or excuse me, after the final chapter in the epilogue is the imperative to begin today. And it says, time is the most precious currency we possess. It is also the most fleeting. We spend it freely while never knowing the balance in our account. We know not what tomorrow holds, nor can we count on its arrival. All we have is this moment, this singular opportunity to step boldly into the arena and begin the work that calls to us. The fear of failure, the voices of doubt, both internal and external, are but distractions from the truth that action is the only path forward.
Oh, dude, that's profound. I mean,
Did
it
you
really
get
is. I'm
chills?
not just,
You
really,
can
it
say
did.
yes, just say
It,
yes.
no, it did actually send a chill up my spine because one of the things that I just like about everything that you've even said, even though some of it can be relatively complex, is that these ideas are, because one of the other questions I was going to ask about was, okay, so, everybody can't be a SEAL team member. Everybody can't be this high performer. I mean, there has to be all these different qualities, but you're breaking it down into some simple ideas here that everybody can use, not just leaders, incremental improvement, act now, time, we don't know what's in our account in terms of time. Wow.
Well, another, one I heard it recently. We've all, I mean, those of us who follow another one of my former colleagues from Naval Special Warfare, Jocko Willing,
Mm,
he was asked on a podcast, and a lot of your listeners, will obviously not just know who he is, but his
yeah,
philosophies and principles on discipline equaling freedom, where
yeah,
it's like, fuck, that's so simple. But that's the power in some of his methodologies.
yeah.
And he was asked, what's the solution to combating fear? And in the true Jocko way, his only response was go. And what he means by that, of course, is exactly what we're talking about. Take action,
Take
move
action.
forward. If you find that that direction is not the right direction, do some reflection as you go, continually get
Hmm.
feedback, and then course correct, pivot as needed. But don't just sit there ruminating on,
Wow.
gosh, I'm fearful of doing this thing. I think about this every day. There's just little things that, that I don't want to do, or it's kind of, I keep moving it to the bottom of my to-do list. I'm not practicing what I preach. And so every morning I think about what did I not do yesterday that I should have just freaking done. Now I got to do it today. I'm not practicing what I preach. So again, continually thinking about making sure that I'm living these methodologies that I know drives positive outcomes. And I know that, you know, that principle will mitigate fear in key areas, or I know that, um, you know,
Oh,
taking this thing off my to-do list will actually alleviate stress and anxiety, even though it's a thing that I think will cause me stress and anxiety. But those things just sitting there, not going unaddressed, are actually the things that are dragging you down.
yeah.
So
Wow. All right, folks, you'll need to rush out and get this book. It's an incredible. What else, before for a few minutes we have left here, is there anything else you'd like to speak about with respect to All In or even the other books, which sound fascinating? That, again, maybe I didn't ask the question or something that you feel like you'd like to share with the audience?
I think that, and the same thing applies with my previous book, Embrace the Suck. And a lot of this is obviously based on incredibly humbling pieces of feedback or testimonies that I've received from that book. And I pray to the good Lord that this book has the same or even an elevated impact of these principles that we talk about, whether they come from the SEAL teams and Naval Special Warfare, or championship sports teams, or you know, multi-time gold medal winning athletes, or astronauts, or people like former teammate Johnny Kim, who's a Harvard medical doctor, an astronaut, and a decorated Navy SEAL. Who knows what he's going to do next?
Yeah,
We put these people on a pedestal, but all these principles, they're the same fundamental principles that lead to a healthy marriage, to being a great, very present parent who's a good coach and mentor, to being a phenomenal professional as an entrepreneur and founder, to being a great leader and manager, to being just a great leader of yourself and pursuing even basic concepts. One thing that I continue to think about as I mature, I'll just say, not age, but mature. But age is what we're talking about,
yeah.
is a principle. It kind of came in the form of a quote, but I'll leave us with this, was also, because we've been talking a lot of big, lofty kind of, if you dumb it down, they're not complex, but some of these more complex notions of habit formation and organizational transformation. But one thing I read recently that I really need to lean more into is that, if the quote, I think, was something along the lines of, I've not yet gained enough wisdom to appreciate the simple things,
Oh, Lord.
right?
Wow.
Let that sit for a minute.
Wow. Yeah, that's
I've not
crazy.
yet gained enough wisdom to appreciate the simple things.
Wow. Yeah. There's a bit of the yin and the yang, again, in fact I was just speaking with I was the speaker on another podcast earlier this morning, and we got into the concept of joy and pain, that you can't really know joy without understanding pain, right? You
No.
have to have those two things in, not in tandem, but yeah, that you can't, certain things you just can't know unless you've gone to the other end of the spectrum, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, listen, my man. Wow. I could ask 1,000 more questions, but I'm sure you're over in California, got a little bit more daylight in front of you. Tell the folks, and don't even hold back. Where can people find you? Programs, businesses, leaders, whatever it is. Certainly your book. I know it's on
Sure.
Amazon but it's coming out on December 2nd.
Yep,
Uh,
which as of
but
today is about a week away. So again, all in
all in.
pathway to
There it
personal
is.
growth, professional excellence. You can got Amazon, any of your favorite retailers. You can pre-order it now, of course. Portion of proceeds go to the Seal Family Foundation.
Nice.
But you can find me on LinkedIn, so I encourage anybody to connect with me there. I share articles from the Forbes Leadership column there on a regular basis, other types of content. Our company website is, and I have to spell it out, but it's EXLR, the number 8.ai. So accelerate.ai. And we're, again, fully integrated hybrid of management consulting and enterprise software. We work with large organizations all over the world, really driving growth and transformation. and operational efficiencies. But also on Instagram, just Brent_Gleeson. And again, Kevin, you're a fascinating guy. I really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully we'll do it
Likewise.
again.
Well, I hope so. And you're welcome to come on anytime. And I look forward to getting your book and really encourage people because the things that you're saying is for everybody. And I hope they reach out. Listen, thank you so much, Brent Gleeson.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you for your service and thank you for spending time with us on Grow Yourself.
Thank you.